Begin the current Daf Masechtas Kidushin Daf Nun Ches. Begin 9 lines down the top of the Yamud, where the Gemara continues regarding the last item we just finished off with. In our previous Mishnah, we were discussing regarding things that are Isur Hana on the Nudvavim Abayz. We said this whole long list: Makadosh Ba'arlo, Klai Kerem, Shar Niskal, Egla Rufat, Sperm Mitzaris, Arnazir, Petchamar, Basabachalab. The last item was Chulin Shenishchdu Bazar. If you have an unconsecrated animal that's slaughtered in the courtyard, if you give that to a woman, she's not going to be engaged because all these things are Isur Hana. The Gemara is going to continue, however, with a different opinion that's not like this halacha of a Mishnah regarding Chulin Shenishchdu Bazar. Shares close by Bekazach and Cheskel, turn to Daf Chaim. Today's daf. Good moed. Some of the discussed in today's daf are machran v'kiddush b'demehen. We spoke about in the Mishnah that although these are Yisur Hana, you're not allowed to be mekadosh with it, but if you sell them and then you mekadosh with the monetary value, then mukadesha shall be engaged. Whereas that relates to the halach of tafsir demayu regarding does the prohibited item also transfer to the monies that if let's say it was sold, which there are only two cases that we say that regarding avodah zara and shvius, regarding the halach of idolatry. And regarding the Shemitah produce, the halacha of, again, Taivas Hana, as we discussed previously, the benefit a person has, is that mammon, or is that ain't a mammon, is that not considered as money? Halacha matanish lahurmu. If you have Kohanic gifts that were not separated yet, meaning every table, every untithed produce you have inside over there, trumas and maisus, is that kamisha homer dami? It's like already separated, it's just somewhere inside, we just never separated. I love kamisha homer dami, it's like it's not separated, and there's no truma and maisus over here, which the relevancy is we see that if Yisrael inherits from his grandfather, a Kohen. If the next Mishnah continues regarding the halacha of other items of doing Kiddushin, which is going to be valid, even though there are kachim items, of the waters of the paraduma and the ash of paraduma, there is Kiddushin. And the Gemara differentiates regarding, it depends if it's beschar hava milui, regarding the wages that you get from bringing the water and filling it up, versus b'schar hazah b'kiddush, regarding the wages you get for actual spraying and sanctification, that although those are both monetary elements of the mechatas and nebrachatas, one is the actual avoid, the one is not, and therefore that would depend if you're allowed to take money from those to give it a monetary value or not. So begin the current daf. We're in the middle of finishing up the discussion from the previous daf, where the Gemara had mentioned the last item in our mission, that's Isur Hana of Chulin Shenishchdu Ba'azara. So the Gemara says, however, Ashkechinu Mar Yehuda, the master Yehuda, encountered L'Rav Yosef, L'Rav Shmuel, B'rei de Rab Bar Chana, these two Talmidei Chacham, they were by the opening of the yeshiva of Rabbah. Amalu, he said to them, I have a question. Tanya in the Braisa, Makadosh B'Petach Hamar. This list, some of the items we mentioned in our Mishnah. If a man takes a Petach Hamar, the firstborn donkey, and he gives it to the woman, says, or Babas V'chal, if he takes this cheeseburger, or b'chulin shenishchu b'azar, chulin that was slaughtered in the azar. Reb Shimon Omer, he says mikudeshes, even though these are lists of things in our Mishnah we said not. He says no, the woman is going to be engaged. So like Rashi explains that the living petach hamar, Reb Shimon goes according to his reasoning, which we mentioned on the previous daf, that he actually says is mutter bahana, and bas b'chal, Reb Shimon goes according to his reasoning. Also, the Gemara said previously, who also holds mutter bahana. As we quoted, we said that there was a machlekes that our Mishnah was the loik Reb Shimon, that we said that although it says three times in the Torah, we said we quoted that there was an opinion of Shimon that says Am Kadosh, and it says Anshe Kodesh by Treif, and just like over there's mutter bahana. So over here that was Reb Shimon. So Reb Shimon holds that these two items of petach hamar and bas b'chalav are mutter bahana. And, as we'll explain momentarily, he holds the same thing applies to chulin shenishchdu bazar. They say no, no, the woman's not going to be engaged because they hold that these three items are asabana. But one thing says the Gemara, we see chulin shenishchdu bazar, or chulin was slaughtered in the azara, l'Reb Shimon, lav deiraisa. That it's not a biblical prohibition, not the prohibition of its slaughtering, and not the prohibition of having benefit from it. And that is, he does not darshan, as we expounded on the end of the previous stuff, berichug makum, that we said that it's only when you're far away, but when you're close by, then you cannot. And so just like when you slaughter mine outside, you slaughter yours inside, it's going to be usher. No, he holds this rabbinic halacha. What's this rabbinic halacha of slaughtering chulin ba'azara? Maybe you're going to come to say that these were kachim that became invalidated after the shechita, which the blood was not sprayed, and you see people having benefit from it. people are going to come to say, oh, kachim that you did not spray the blood, you let him know, which you're not allowed to. So therefore, if you did slaughter a chulin bazara, we said that it's going to be forbidden to have any benefit. Which, Taisus wonders. He says it sounds like it's not that right. It sounds like then it would be rabbinic. So how does that work? So let's discuss exactly why is not a problem. Al kapanim, biblically, it's not. It's the Kidushin is going to take effect. The Gemara says v'neminu. The Gemara, so he asked the contradiction. This Mar Yehuda that he's quoting this brisa, and he says, "But I have a contradiction from the Mishnah Masechtas Tamur. What's the stira?" The Mishnah they quote Rabbi Shimon Omer. He says, "Chulin shenish l'bazara. If you have a chulin that slaughtered bazara, yisrufu has to be burnt. Chen chaya shenish bazara. So to a wild animal that slaughtered bazara has to be burnt. Meaning, as Rashi explains the Gemara's question, what's Mar Yehuda's question? It's not sufficient to just bury it. Now, if it's just rabbinically prohibited, you could just get rid of it. You wouldn't have to actually burn it. Obviously, that the prohibition is biblical, which we find that those are like kachim that are biblical requires to be burnt. Because rabbinic, we wouldn't be so stringent. Because although by an animal, we would make a gzeira that, okay, like we said before, that it might get confused with psuli makdashin, that we shouldn't say that the kachim that are puzzle, you could be buried. But the question is also from the wild animal. If the ikar isra of chulin bazara is not the raisa mehechetesa, but you wouldn't come to say that you make it by a chaya oto kachim, why would you have to burn the wild animal, even really to be buried? Most definitely, there must be the isra min hatayra, and the burning is rabbinic that we were geyser by behema, because you might come to say kachim that puzzle could be buried, and the Torah says it's to be burnt. So b'chaya, they also made a gzera not to differentiate regarding this halacha of chulin that was slaughtered in the azara, where the chacham equated their words in all places not to be mafakafik in them. But that would only make sense if you hold that it's the iraisa. But this is Reb Shimon. Didn't we just quote a brisa that says Reb Shimon says that it's not the iraisa? That's why it would be Kidushin. And that was the question of Mar Yehud to these two Talmidei Chacham. So the Gemara tells Ishtiku they were quiet. They didn't have a good answer. So it's like Rabbi. This was again by the opening of the Shiva of Rabbi. They come inside to the Rosh Hashiva to Rabbi. Amalu, he says to them, Palga. Palga is referring to this Mar Yehuda, who he's someone who provokes. That he always finds something to disagree with his colleagues. Ukmintchu. I'm gonna set you straight. What are we talking about over here? The Rabbi Shimon says in the Brisa that she's gonna be engaged. You're right. Shimon holds like our Mishnah that chulin shenish bazar is da'iraisa and therefore has to be a sreifa. So how could he say over in the Brisa she's gonna be engaged? It's a isur hanav mid'iraisa. It's a specific case. This chulin animal that was slaughtered in the azara, they ultimately found that it was a treif, had a mortal defect. But Rabbi Shimon goes according to his reasoning for a different halacha. The time like in the Brisa, if someone slaughters an animal that has a recognizable mortal defect, or let's say it was not recognizable, but they found that it was a treifa. Both and this one are if they are chulin dazara, Shimon permits to have benefit from it. The sages say it's forbidden. Why? Because Rabbi Shimon goes according to his reasoning, as the Gemara brings the chulin daf pei at aleph, or daf pei over there, or in Baba Kama daf ayin alpha and aleph. The deal shchita she'einu la'achila, a slaughtering that doesn't make something permitted to be eaten, is not called a shchita, and the whole liability and the prohibition that comes through shchita would not take effect in it. So therefore, the issue of these chulin is only through shchita, and since it's not shchita because it's a treifa, so it's not going to be matir ta'achila. So therefore, that's why you can mekadosh the isha, because it didn't do a shchita bazar. But if you did a shchita, of course, Rabbi Shimon would agree that you have to burn it because it's deraisa, and he does not disagree with the halach of the Mishnah. He just says over here, do mekadesh because it was a nimtzas treifa, so it wasn't a quote unquote shchita, so it wasn't shchita bazar. So therefore, you can mekadosh the isha with that. Now, the next thing we said in the Mishnah, what? Does it have value? Yeah, it would be, you're allowed to have enough of it because it wasn't slaughtered. It would just, let's say, died in the Azara. Let's say even if it died, so you allow animal, whatever it is, it would not be aser because it was not a shchita. Right, and obviously you can't eat it because it's a treifa, but you could use it for whatever it is. Now, then the Mishnah continued, it said, okay, but mochron, all these items that we said if let's say it was sold the kiddush b'dmehen, and we said okay, then you can sanctify with its monetary proceeds. Then Mukadeshus, if you give the money to the woman, she's going to be engaged. Says the Gemara Manolim, where do we know that these items are not toifis the damim? That the sanctity, the prohibited status does not transfer to the funds that you're, because then if it would be, then you wouldn't be able to Makadesh a woman with the dam. Says the Gemara, I'll tell you the reason. Because the fact that Torah reveals to us by idolatry, as the Pasuk says, that it should be like the prohibited status as it is, which teaches is whatever you make from it. The word vayisa, whatever you make from the avodah zara, is going to have the same halacha kamayhu as itself. Okay, so we see by avodah zara that whatever gets transferred has the same status. But machlal, the inference is the chalisim shebetorah sharu. If we're telling you, we're pointing out specifically by idolatry, obviously all of the prohibited items in the Torah are going to be permitted. Says, well, why? Why don't you learn out from that? Usually you say, when you have an example, a model, you learn out for that to all the Torah. Says the Gemara, no, because you have idolatry in the halacha of the Shemitah produce that are two psukim teaching the same idea. And we know a klal throughout the Shas, when you have two psukim teach the same idea, you cannot teach it to other places, because if it did, you would say it one time. Why are you saying it another time? Obviously, because the other time would not know from the other one. Which Tosfos asks the question, says, wait a second, we would not know one from the other. It says one we would know from the other. As long as you could learn that from one, you don't need the second one. Why did you say the second one? Obviously, then it's not coming to teach. Says the Gemara, what's these two sources? Idolatry we just mentioned from the pasuk of Yisachem Kamayu. Shviz Mahi, what's the halach of Shemitah that we find that it is taifis the damim? So it's a pasuk of Yikra. It says Yovel he. It is Yovel, which Yovel and Shemitah have the same halacha regarding this idea. Kaidish ti'elechem, it should be holy for you. What does that mean, Kaidish? So ma Kaidish, just like Kadishim, sanctified items for the base of English. Taifis is damav, it transfers its sanctity to the monies of Shvis. Taifis is damah. So too, the prohibited element of Shemitah also snatches it onto the money. Now, so the Gemara says, wait a second, Ima Kaidish Taifis is damav but then you should say, just like by Kachim, when the sanctity goes to the money, then that animal goes out to be unconsecrated. So then you would say the same thing would be by Shemitah produce, that if you sell it, then the sanctity goes to the money, but then the Shemitah produce actually is now chulin, and it would be permitted. No, it says tia, it should be, which means babiyasate, it should always remain in that state. So Kate said, how so? So as follows. Let's say you take with the Shemitah produce, you go ahead and you buy meat with your Shemitah produce. You go to the meat store, Moshe's Fleischgeschäft, and you take your Shemitah produce and you give it to him, and he says, okay, he gives you a piece of meat. Both of them have to be liquidated in the Shemitah year, because the original Shemitah produce remains prohibited, and what you transfer it onto also. Now let's say, babasar dagim, let's say, the meat that you bought, you say, hey, you need a little fish, Shabbos Kodesh. So you take some of the meat and you go to your uncle's fish store and you say, here's some of the meat, and gives you fish. So yotza basar. Now the meat actually gets removed from the Kedusha Shviyas, because it's only by the original produce of the Shemitah that we say tia, the Bahaviyasate remains always in that sanctity. But the Chiluf Feihen, what you transferred it onto, that actually will go out to be chulun. So the meat gets removed from the sanctity, but nechnus dagam. Now the fish take the place of the transferred sanctity. Let's say bedagim yain. Let's say this uncle goes from his fish store and he buys to Budich's wine store. So yotzadagim nechnas yain. So now the fish go out from the sanctity and the wine takes the place. But yain shemen. Let's say he takes the wine and he buys oil. Yotzad yain nechnas shemen, goes out the wine, comes in the oil. Okay, it says, how do you understand this? So basically, the Gemara says is that achron nitvas b'shvi. The last thing of the transfer, it was what retains the sanctity of the Shemitah produce. Uperiatzmi, and the original Shemitah produce also is going to be us, is going to be forbidden after the time of the beer, that it doesn't go out from its kedusha. The guy has to know. Usually it's really referring to the. Well, usually it's referring to the guy himself anyway. Really, that this guy's taking. It's this guy himself who ends up with it. Really, he's taking the meat and buying fish, and then he's taking the fish and buying meat, whatever it is that he ends up, and that's usually the last item he's going to be holding anyway. So the Gemara says, this all makes sense according to one that says that when you have two things teaching the same thing, you cannot teach. But according to the one that says that if you only have two things to teach, the same thing you could actually teach. So we should learn that from Avodah Zarah and Shemitah that it is Taifas Dam of all the things that are Sur Hana. Says the Gemara, no mi'utik sibi. There are exclusionary terminologies written by these two halachas to tell us it's only here and nowhere else. Ksivach, it says over by Avodah Zarah, ki chedem hu, because it is chedem, which who says only here, nowhere else. Ksivach says over there, yovel, he, it is yovel. He in it, yes, midachunilai, other things not, and therefore, that's what he said in the halacha of the Mishnah, that when you're Mekadesh Isha with the monetary transfer of these items, she will be Mekadesh because the Issachar does not go to the money, it's only by Avodah Zarah and by Shemitah. Now we get to the halacha of the next Mishnah, continue with other whole sanctified items, where here actually we will consider it as valid monies to make a Kedushin with. HaMekadesh b'Trumas, someone takes Truma, Uvamaisris, Meiser, Matanis, which Matanis refers to the foreleg and the jaw and the stomach, which is always supposed to be given to the kohen by any animal that you slaughter. Umechatas, or the waters of the that's used for the paraduma purification process, or the ashes of the paraduma. All these things that is in Mekadesh, if we give it to a woman, she's going to be engaged. Yisrael, even if he's a Jew, meaning you would think that, in other words, the Gemara thinks that even though he doesn't have by any of these things, but Taibas Ana, that he could decide which coin he wants to give it to, and that means to say the woman also is only getting a Taibas Ana, because she has to give it to the coin, and the Maisa has to be given to the Levi. He's being Mekadesh with this Taibas Ana, because it sounds like the Tana holds Taibas Ana is Mammon, meaning that you could decide who goes to Shlishi, right? When you decide who goes to, you're not getting the Shlishi Aliyah, but I get to decide who goes to. So it has a monetary value. It's a Taibas Ana. That's what it sounds like, that you're giving this to the woman. What are you giving her? Truma. She can't eat Truma. He's the Yisrael. And she's not going to be married to Yisrael. She's not a Bas Kohen. What does it help? It sounds like because you get to decide now which Kohen you want to give it to. That has a monetary value. However, the Gemara brings right now, Amma Ula. Ula says that Toivas Hana, that when you have the goodness of the benefit, I mean, you get to decide where it gets earmarked, ain't a mammon. That's not monetary value, which Rashi explained to me, Mekadesh Isha. Yes, it's obviously some pleasure you're getting, but there's no monetary value that you could use that as a Kidushin for a woman. However, Isvei Rabbi Ula, Rabbi has told from our Mishnah. Our Mishnah said, Mekadesh betrumas, b'maisis, matonis, mechatz, all these sanctified items. Even if he's a Yisrael, not a Kohen, so what is he giving her if it has no value to him or to her, because it's all it is a Taibas Ana? Obviously, Taibas Ana is a mammon. Says the Gemara, Amalei says, no, here the case is very interesting. Hacham is be Yisrael shenaflei tefala mebeis avi imay kohen. His mother was a Bas Kohen. His father is the Yisrael. Happens. So his grandfather passed away. His grandfather had his own plantation, or untithed produce, that now the Einikel, the Yisrael, inherited from his grandfather, the Kohen. Okay. And, second of all, the Kustavar, Tanav Mishnah held that Matanish Lahormu, when you have Kohana gifts that weren't separated yet, Kimisha Hormedami, it's like they were separated. Why? Since they're going to be separated, you're going to take Truma from it, and you already finished the Malacha for that. So it comes out that the Zayd, the Kohen, already merited in his lifetime the Truma that's in the Tevel, because he only has to separate it and keep it for himself. Kohen could keep his own Truma for himself. So the Einikel, the Yairish, he could separate it and he could sell it to Kahanim. And she could also sell it. So they actually get the monetary value, not just the Taibas Ana, they get him to keep the Truma. Which Rashi really says, the Gemara could have explained that it's not Tevel that you have Matanish Lahumu Kamisha Hormadami. Could have said very simply, the Zayd had Truma that he inherited from his grandfather. But the problem with that would be then, what's the Chiddush of the Mishnah? Obviously, he should be engaged. It's regular monetary value. It's something that he inherited. It's Truma that he has. That's what Rashi says. The Gemara wanted to say, Empress, a Chiddush. Chiddush is Tevel. And there's a Chiddush over here. Because it's based on the principle of that Matonish Lahurmu, Kamish Homer, it's like as if it was separated. So even though it really wasn't, you would say that there's no Truma over here. The Zayda didn't get any of the Truma. Now the Einik would have to separate Truma and would have to give it, and would be Taibas Ana. Say, no, really, Taibas Ana is not Mammon. So what is he giving this woman? He's giving her the truma that he gets to keep and she gets to keep now. And she could sell it to Kahanim, and you actually have the value itself, because the matanas that were not separated is like as if they were already separated. The Gemara continues, this question itself. Mammon or Yena Mammon? Is the benefit of a pleasure? No, it's truma, but he just gets to keep it for himself. So it's his.
Can only be consumed by another guy.
Right. So this Einikul but owns it, but this Einikul owns it. Yeah. Yeah, he owns it. It's his own monies. A regular Yisrael doesn't own the truma. He gets the right to choose which kohen to give it to. Here, the Zaida already had truma. If his Zaida had truma mamash, Zaida owns it. It's his own stuff. The Einikul would inherit it. That said, Rash, that would be a two pashut of a case. That's why you have to say Epes HaChidush of Matash Lahumar Kamisha Omer Damet. So now, Rabbi Bar asked Rav Huna this question: Tevas Anah, the benefit of deciding who gets a pleasure, is that mammon or ina mammon? So Malay says Tinisu learned in our Mishnah, Mekadesh betrumos, Mamaises, Matanas, Mechadz, Befapara. Harizim Mekadesh said the woman's going to be engaged with Yisrael, which obviously that's a Tevas Anah. Malay said to him, Pavalava Kimna, didn't I already explain this? That it's no raya from our Mishnah. Our Mishnah told me, Yisrael Shanaf Loy Teval, maybe Sabi Imay Kain, where the Einikul inherited, the grandson inherited from his grandfather, and it's not because of a Tevas Anah, that's because he actually inherited the actual value of the Truma itself. So the Gemara continues, Amad Beis, Amalei, so he responded to him, he says, Hutza'at. You're taken out. So if he was embarrassed. Husava Mishmaita Kamali, he thought that he was referring to his teaching, that you're removed from this teaching. It's evident that you're not such a chacham, or that you're someone who cuts reeds in the swamps, like a lashon of hutza bedafna, which are terms of like palm fronds. So I say he didn't know what he meant. He was getting embarrassed. He said, "No, this is what I was saying. That asi the hutzel koi kabasech. Hutza is from the word of hutzel. And some girsas actually have the hutzlaat, not hutzaat, whatever. But be there's a may trying to say you're like Rabbi Asi of Hutzel, who was like you, who you're right, he rejects the raya, and he says there's no raya from our Mishnah Tevas Anah. Could be Tevas Anah in the moment, and our Mishnah is when he inherited from his grandfather. But the Gemara says, let's say this actually a machlokes tanoim, that if Tevas Anah is mammon or not. Why? Because we have the following brisa. Brisa says, Hagoinev tivloi shel chaver. Someone steals his friend's untithed produce. Guy sees mamash a beautiful field, all these grain. He's driving to New Hampshire somewhere. On the way, he sees this beautiful field. He steals the tevel. Okay. Now, Mishabnoi, obviously, he's got to pay him back. But what does he pay him back? So the first time it says he pays back the meitiblo shechaveda divi Rebbe. Rebbe holds you got to pay him back the whole value of the untithed produce, meaning even though inside there's truma and meiser, if let's say it was worth $10,000, all that grain that you stole, you got to pay him back $10,000. This he says, no, you only pay back the monetary value of the chulin that's inside. But the truma and meiser, he says, you're not my litigant. When the kohen will come to be tevei him, he'll reject him also. And he'll say, I wasn't going to give it to you, I was going to give it to another kohen. Whatever the trumas and meisters, which is whatever's inside of here, let's say 25%, that's some total. Meshach Chachma says that that's mamish what the esrog is regarding the rest of it's 1 out of 4, and that's how all you give is 25%. You do the math. The Meshach Chachma and Parash Emor says that's the same thing. So also that part is with the trumas and the meises and everything, the bikurim, everything. That's not your thing. That's Hashem's. That's the kinds. Says the Gemara. Oh, my love isn't this the machlekes tanaim? The Marsava Rebbe, who he said that you have to give everything back, he held Toivis Hano. No. This that the owner gets to decide which client it goes to, that's mammon. That's my money. You owe me that money. Then we have to pay back the entire value of the tevel. But the Rabbi Yehuda held, no, tevel not ain't mammon, it's not money. And therefore, you don't have to give back the trumas and meisters. Isn't this a machlokes tanaim? Says the Gemara. Look. Right.
He really doesn't owe him the whole
right.
thing. He only owes him
right.
the value that is.
Right.
It's not as much as the
Right. Trial is exactly what does the Gemara mean to say? Should he give him back? Sounds like the whole value, unless if he's giving him back what he stole, I don't have to compensate you for the tevis number because you're getting back what I gave you originally. Because anyways, this guy's gonna have to give it to a kohen. So, yeah. So the Gemara says, no, it's not a riot. The Kula and the Gemara has four possible explanations for this. So the first explanation is yes, it's machlekes if a tevis is not a mammon is not. We have three other interpretations. The Kula Amano, according to everyone, tevis no ain't a mammon. Not true. Like the Gemara had previously quoted from Alamayra, everyone agrees that it's not considered monetary value. But over here, we're talking about where he inherited this tevel from his grandfather that's a kohen, and regarding the principle of when you have matanas that were not separated, if they're like separated, that's kamiflagi. It's on those two variables that the machlekes tanoim is on. Mar Sabar Rebbe held Kamisha Homer Damin. It's as if it was already separated. And that means to say his grandfather, who was a kohen, was already zeich in it. Now, Rashi points out, I dis Meiser Rishon. Why would you have to pay him back, according to Rebbe, also the value of the Meisers? Because as the Gemara brings in Yevamos Beivama Beis, Ezra penalized the Levim because they didn't come back for the second base of Mikdash, that even that goes to Kahanim. Talk upon him, the Trumas and the Meisers, you owe to this guy not only the Chulim part of the table, but also the Trumas and Meisers, because that actually he owns already from Zaida, who was a Kohen. Or Marsha, Rabbi is really held that no, love Commissioner Madam, it's not like it's separated, and therefore the Yerush has to give it to a Kohen, and he only gets Tevis Anah, and that Emin agrees is not Mammon. That was interpretation number 2. Could be Emin agrees Tevis Anah is not Mammon. The Machlek is regarding, do we say the Matana Shlo Homer is Commissioner Damin or not? Or interpretation number 3. By saying everyone, you can say the Kulam according to everyone. No, Kamisha Homer Damin. Everyone agrees that the matanas that were not separated yet is as if it was separated. And but everyone agrees that the Tevis is not money. And here we're not talking about where he inherited it from his grandfather, the Kain. It grew in his own land. So what's the machlekes? They're disagreeing regarding the Allah of Shmuel, which is the Amar Shmuel says Chita Achas Paiteres Zakri. Shmuel says that biblically, for Truma, one kernel of wheat would exempt the whole pile from Truma. So although we usually say 140, 150, 160, whatever, that's only rabbinically, but biblically is just one kernel. Okay, so the Tana Rabbi, Islay de Shmuel, he had like Shmuel. So the owner of the Tevel could tell the Ganav, that's all mine. Because I can exempt myself with one kernel of wheat for Truma. Don't tell me, Truma is a mices, that's 10th, and that's this, and that's that, what? Which Rashi points out, that when this Rabbi disagreed with Yehuda, it was only on the Truma part. The Meiser, he agrees that Labal Tvam the Diyat, that he wouldn't have to pay him back. Although it says he has to pay him back the entire Dmei Tivla, according to this Pshat, he wouldn't have to pay him back everything. Because the Meiser, that you have to give exactly a tenth. You can't say, I would exempt myself with one kernel. According to this Pshat, says Rashi, Machlik is only on the Truma part, where he says that, no, you owe me all of the Truma. People usually give 1/50th. That's rabbinically, but biblically I can exempt myself with one kernel, and therefore you owe it to me. Umar, let's say the Shmuel. Rabbi Yehuda did not hold like Shmuel, and therefore by Truma also, he cannot be teveya him, and therefore he does not have to pay him back for the Truma. Which Rashi points out that really the Gemara could have explained also that it's talking about that this Tevel he inherited, and according to everyone, it's like as if Shaloyhum Redamian, and that Tevis No is not Mammon, the Machlekes is in Shmuel. So if the Gemara would have explained like that, then that means to say that the Mishnah that we said was Mukudeshes would not be like any one of them. Because since Tevis No is not Mammon, and Matanish Lahorma is Kalahorma Damian, so how could the woman be engaged? But he doesn't have Truma, he only has Tevis No, even if he inherited from his grandfather, the Kain. But now that we're saying that it is Kamisha Horma Damian, and the Machlek is regarding Tevel that came from his own land, so we would be able to explain the Mishnah as we open up the Gemara with Ula, according to everyone. Because, it's Tevis No is not Mammon, but it's when you inherited from the grandfather, and it's like Kamisha Horma Damian, that's why the Gemara explains it like that. Now, fourth interpretation says the Gemara. If you want, you could say no one holds like Shmuel. You're not allowed to just give one kernel of wheat. You have to give a festa amount for your truma. So, in the time of the Rebbe, so how do we understand Rebbe? Why does Rebbe say you owe the dmei of the trumas and maises in there to the owner of the table? But I thought he lambal from the diad. It goes to kahanim, not to him, because the kontur rabbanan leganav. Very simple. The rabbis penalize the thief that the truma should not remain by him, because it's going to remain by him because there's no one that could claim the money of the truma, because every coin that comes along says, I'm not going to give it to you, I'll give it to another coin, I'll give it to another coin. And that's the principle of nimtza chayte nisker. We don't want that a sinner should gain, where he's going to be able to hold all the truma, and therefore he has to give all of it back to the owner. Or the by 7 you can say a different way, the kulam islu shmuel, everyone really holds like Shmuel. That really you could exempt yourself with just one kernel. So what's the reason of Rabbi Yehuda? Why, according to him, don't you have to pay back the truma to the owner if the halacha is like Shmuel, that he really doesn't have to give more than one kernel of truma, and therefore all of that quote unquote truma should really go to the owner? Because the katsura balabais, according to this other interpretation, the rabbis penalize the homeowner. Why did they penalize him? Because he should not have delayed holding on to untithed produce. He should have separated the fact that it was an untithed state and the guy stole it. It's your negligence, and therefore we penalize him, and therefore that's why, even though technically you could have exempted yourself with one kernel, how much is the general amount that people usually separate b'truma is how much the ganav could hold on to and does not have to give it to you. Now the Gemara asks, it's not. The Gemara asks on our Mishnah, because we learned in the Mishnah, Hamakadesh, Betrumais, B'maisus, Matanas, we learned all these different items, and one of them was B'mei Chatas, the waters of the paraduma, or Be'efa par, the ashes of the paraduma. And we said, if you take that water, let's say, that you drew from the Mayim Chaim, the living waters to use for the paraduma process, the woman's going to be engaged. Bavapi, Yisrael, like we said, even if he's a non-kain. Problem is, there seems to be a contradiction from the Mishnah Masechtas B'chayros. Mishnah says, if someone takes wages to judge a court case, which is hana, dina b'teinu, so his judgments are void. Now I'll take payment. Lahoid, if he's taking money to testify, idusa b'teila, his testimony is invalid. Lahazis, if he's taking payment to spray the purification waters on a tummy person, or kaddish, or to sanctify the mechatas, meaning when you put the ashes on the spring water, that's called sanctifying it. Meimav meima'acha, his waters are cave waters, which Rashi says are putrid waters, and ve'efrei mikla, and its ashes are ashes from a regular oven, meaning it has no halachic value. Taisa says, why did Rashi have to say that cave waters are because they're stinky waters, like as if that's why it's not? Taisa says very simple. It's cave waters because it's gathered waters, it's not living waters. We need mayim chaim. And when it says it's ashes from the oven, meaning that means to say he violated the biblical command, which Hashem says, just like I do for free, you're also supposed to do for free. And this guy who did it for payment, he violated the words of Torah, and therefore that's why it's not going to be valid. But one thing we see is that you're not allowed to take wages, you're not allowed to take hana from the sanctification waters of the paraduma. So how are we saying in our Mishnah that a guy can be mekadosh isha with the mechatas? What does it help? You're not allowed to have hana from the mechatas. So what hana are you giving her? Says the Gemara, my Abai says like kash not difficult. It says kan in our Mishnah is vischar, is the wages, what he's giving her is havava, of bringing the ashes from place to place, or milui, or drawing the water, which that's just tircha, that's just effort, and the Torah permits. That's not incumbent upon a person. A person is allowed to take wages for that, and therefore with that shall be engaged. But kan, the Mishnah Masechtas B'chayros b'schar hazav kiddush, is the wages of spraying or sanctifying, which there's no tircha. That's like the way Rashi explains the schar of limud of the mitzvah is really what he's taking. And the Torah says, just like says the Gemara in the Dam of I do for free, says Hashem, you're also supposed to do it for free, and therefore that's what you not take wages for.
Really, Israel is not allowed to that's that, right?
Mechat is just really it's just spring water, this mechatas, and then they put on the ashes of paraduma, and then
before the ash.
Yeah. It's just the actual spring water itself that they're going to use. Problem is you're not allowed to charge for that. So what monetary value is there? So on that, the Gemara is differentiating. Abai says for the effort of schlepping the water, so that you're allowed to charge for. When you say you're not allowed to charge, is for the actual avoida part of it, of the spraying. And the Gemara says, because that's not a tircha, it's not an effort, that's just like a halacha. A halacha you're not allowed to charge for. And the Gemara says, Degenami, a precise reading of our Mishnah indicates that it's not going on the spraying and the kiddush. Because the Ktani Hacha, we said in our Mishnah, what's he b'mekadosh with? B'meichatas, with the waters. B'eivapar, with the ashes, which weren't mixed yet. That, for the tircha, the effort, that you're allowed to charge for. That he's b'mekadosh with. Ktani Hasam, the Mishnah B'chayr says the words lahazas u'lekadosh, to spray and to sanctify. Shema Minah, obviously, but they were talking about by the avoida part that you're not allowed to charge, and therefore that would not be valid. Kidushin Hadul Achish Mekadosh. I'll turn to the second parak, Mesechta Kidushin Parak Ish Mekadosh. We spoke about the halachas of Ish Mekadosh, Boi B'Shluchai, different ways of being Mekadosh, and as we spoke about that he has to give her somewhat of a monetary value. We spoke of what is considered moment, what's not considered moment, and thank you to any time for hosting us.